Devil Country by David Hardy. Chapter 13. Later that night, with Leonard still arguing quietly with the amused minister, Oliver had retired to a little hut which the renegades had hastily constructed for their use. With no one else in the camp that Heinrich really trusted as much as this young devil, Heinrich followed and sat in the corner of the hut, too restless to sleep, but too afraid to walk around the camp unless accompanied by his youthful attendant. Instead, he held the shark's tooth in his hand and the needle in the other. He was pleased to find that his arm was healing well and felt better every day. However, he was also somewhat bothered as he looked at the little gift he was creating. The prince thought the boy had gone to sleep some time ago, and he was surprised when the little voice asked, "What's wrong, my lord?" Heinrich jumped slightly.
"Oh, Oliver! Nothing. Nothing's wrong."
"You looked so sad."
"I—"
began Heinrich, before he paused, and started again.
"Just anxious. I'm wondering if I might ever get to see the Lady Eileen."
"I'm sure you will, my lord," said Oliver reassuringly. "Father promised he would take you to the Castle Novem."
"I fear that in light of that renegade minister's machinations, Leonard may be trapped in a plot he may not altogether support. If we do arrive at Novem, it may not be as allies, but as conquerors."
"And yet you agreed to it."
"Aye,"
said Heinrich.
"So I did. Foolish of me."
"I think it was very honourable of you, my lord. You put father's needs in front of your own."
"Did you not hear when I said that once we arrived at the castle, I would sell you all out to an inquisition to learn your alchemical secrets?"
"Yes, my lord. I just didn't believe you."
Heinrich snorted and said,
"Bah!" before pocketing the incomplete scrimshaw and leaning against the corner of the little shack. Oliver refused to cease his staring, and Heinrich became somewhat nervous as the devil looked upon him with that now familiar stare of curiosity.
"Is my father—"
began the boy, unsure of himself. "My lord, is my father one of your knights now?"
"What are you talking about?"
"I saw the little horse head in my father's possession," said Oliver. "You made it, did you not?"
"Well, yes."
"Why?"
"Well, it's just that—"
said the prince, trying to find words to explain his unclear feelings upon the matter.
"It's a chess knight."
"Do you know chess?"
"No." "Of course you don't,"
Heinrich muttered, before explaining.
"Well, in chess,
the knight pieces have a unique way of moving. They move in a strange diagonal way, 2 spaces forward and 1 space to the side. It's far different than how any other piece on the board moves, and an inexperienced player won't see the use in them. However, a great player will understand the use of this strange movement. Knights have the capacity to attack from unexpected angles, and even from behind his own lines. This reminded me of Leonard. That's all." "Then," began Oliver, sounding excited, "you said you like to give your knights little trinkets like that. Does that mean that father is now one of your—" However, before Oliver could finish, his father came in the door. He forgot everything in favor of jumping to his feet and rushing to hug him. Leonard trilled to his son and stroked the fuzz upon his face. Oliver barely complained, just happy to see his father. "Leonard," said the prince simply.
"Lord Heinrich,"
replied Leonard, as he looked down at Oliver.
"I must speak with Lord Heinrich alone for a while. Please stay here and get some sleep."
"But—"
"No, this is important. Sleep, little one. I'll join you soon."
Oliver was annoyed, and looked back towards Heinrich on the off chance that he would intervene. However, the prince knew better than to presume too much where the devil's child was concerned. Soon Oliver had been put to bed, quite comfortable on the dirt floor with Leonard's bedsheet cloak draped around his shoulders, while Leonard and Prince Heinrich exited the hut and walked some ways away. Heinrich could see that the party had wound down. Only a few devils were left sitting on felled logs around the fire, singing a quiet, chattering aria together. Eventually, Leonard led the prince out to a quiet clearing in the forest. Once they stopped, the prince looked over at Leonard and noticed that the devil was looking up to the stars. His antennae and drawn-in mandibles betrayed how upset he was.
Heinrich didn't know the right words to say in this situation, and so he said nothing. "You probably heard the minister's plan," said Leonard, after a moment of silence between them.
"I caught the gist of it. I know that the renegades are planning an attack on Greyville, and then on Novem."
"I tried to explain to the minister that it was folly to try to win our freedom by force. I'm sure that there must be some way to make peace between us without resorting to war. I'm so tired of war."
"He can't enact his plan without you, can he? You could simply refuse."
"You know I cannot. The minister is correct on one point. The camp at Greyville must be destroyed, and those poor people must be freed. I tried to dissuade him from further war after that, but he is stubborn."
"So where does that leave me, Leonard?"
cried Heinrich suddenly, anger in his voice. "I'm sorry. I tried to get you back to the Castle Novem."
"He tried, he says. Didn't try very hard. A few clicks from that minister, and you are right back in that camp."
"And a few clicks from me, and you agreed to stay here. We're both to blame for our current predicament. The minister played us both against one another."
"I can't let you attack a human town, Leonard."
"I understand that, but what would you have me do? All of a sudden I'm now a leader to these people. The minister has drummed into their heads that all humans are the enemy. It's a persuasive argument. And now they're all excited to go fight for the freedom of the species."
"So stop it! If you're the leader, you can stop it, can't you?"
"It's not that simple, Lord Heinrich. The minister's inspiration has ensured that with or without my approval, the renegades are going to begin attacking human settlements. If I stay, I can potentially steer the renegades away from savagery in the name of revenge. If we must liberate the camp through combat, then let it be on my terms, so we might reduce the amount of casualties on both sides."
Heinrich watched Leonard's tortured face as he made this speech, and suddenly understood the situation fully. The way Leonard felt was exactly the same as when Heinrich was forced by Leonard to lead those peasants against the bandits. A petty part of him wanted to gloat over this reversal of fortune, but a bigger part of him knew that it would be in bad taste. Leonard truly cared about his people, and also, for some reason, cared about the Krusslish as well. Heinrich couldn't quite understand why, but he knew instinctively that it was a trait to be lauded. "I suppose," began Heinrich, "that makes me your prisoner."
"No, Lord Heinrich. I still have my duty," he answered. "I'll find a way to deliver you peacefully to the Castle Novem once this trouble in Greyville is finished. I'll deliver you and free my people without committing genocide."
In the plains far from the renegade camp, the shadows of the clouds passed over the slivered moon, casting the green into darkness. Indistinct figures darted across the field. At the head of the group was Silvus Denning, barely visible in the rolling shadows. His black armor contrasted sharply with the white plate of his subordinates. The group slowed to a stop, swords raised. Once it was clear they were not followed, one of the knights took up a wooden stick dipped in pitch and held it up to a companion, who lit the torch with a flint. With the torch's light casting its glow on Denning's retinue, the four knights visibly relaxed, and Denning's hound curled up to rest. Their pursuers were lost, and the sacrifice of their companion was not in vain.
"We set up camp here. No cooking fire. We cannot draw undue attention to ourselves."
"Aye, sir," said the four knights as they gathered around, arranging themselves in a circle, sitting close together for warmth. Denning stayed standing, however, looking down at a cloth-wrapped parcel in his hands. "Sir Denning," said one of the knights, "you need your rest, sir." The knight in black armor looked over at his men, then suddenly used his free hand to whip his helmet from his head. His eyes were wild with a passion so great that it caused his men to worry somewhat for their leader's state of mind. His craggy face held a grim expression, hardening his icy blue eyes.
"Do not disturb me," he said quietly. "I wish to be alone." Come, dog.
The knights did not argue, although they did look at one another in confusion as their commander turned away and walked until he was well past the rise of a small hill and disappeared behind it. Soon enough, Denning sat upon the grass in privacy, and his hound came up and laid its head upon his master's lap, looking up into the knight's unsteady expression.
Sir Randolph gave his life for this,
he said, scratching the hound behind the ear with his free hand.
According to Prince Heinrich, it is some kind of devil alchemy. It may lend its user power.
The moon cast Denning's face in long shadows, and he looked up, meeting his eyes with the curtain of stars above. He had seen devils as they truly were, savage, unruly, spiteful, resentful. To think that they dropped from the heavens was unthinkable. To be able to rid themselves of the vile creatures and make use of their raw power would be a boon to the kingdom for all time. Slowly, his eyes lowered to the parcel, and he carefully began to unwrap it until the vial of red was exposed to the brisk night air.
I have no idea what the effects may be,
said Sir Denning, explaining things to the one creature he truly trusted.
It may steal my very soul away and leave me like the devils themselves. But if it lends me the power to defend my lord's realm...
He took up the bottle in a strong grip and pulled the black rubber stopper from the top. Instantly, his nose was invaded by an acrid smell. His hound recoiled visibly, flinching away from his master and pacing in sudden unease. Sir Denning's eyes watered at the smell of the chemical, reminiscent of burning bodies, mixed with a blacksmith's shop. Already, when exposed to the air, the chemical bubbled madly in its vial.
"May the saints above have mercy on my soul,"
he said, struggling not to gag.
"But I must, for the sake of the realm. That abominable camp must be destroyed."
Deep in his stomach there had been a chill when he saw the renegade camp, and the strange alchemical madness in the iron house. He had recoiled to learn how many devils lived outside the camps, breeding freely, hunting, singing, dancing. It filled him with fear that these monsters were free to threaten the Duchy Novem. He covered the neck of the bottle with a thumb in order to take in one last breath of fresh air as a human being. If he were to lose that humanity, at least he could say he was allowing it in the name of the Duke Novem, and to save his beloved Eileen's betrothed. Denning nodded slowly as he steeled his courage. He raised the foul concoction to his lips and took a draw from it. He struggled not to spit it out right then, as it instantly burned his tongue and then his throat as it traveled down his gullet. He emptied the vial quickly before hunching over in pain, dropping the empty vial. He nearly vomited, but managed to keep his stomach. His eyes were glued shut in agony as he held his mouth and nose, struggling to keep the horrible potion down. His entire mouth tasted as if he had been licking coins all day long, and his sore throat and burning stomach caused him to grunt in pain and agony. However, as the hound looked on, pacing wildly at his master's pain, unable to approach because of the painful smell and unable to run away from his master's agony, Denning's face softened. He seemed to calm himself, and his body's reactions slowed until his breathing had deepened and normalized. His eyes were closed until he felt a warmth on his sweating brow. The hound was licking his face. The burning in his gullet was still present, but his mouth no longer tasted of copper. It would never taste anything again, as he would later realize. He gave a deep sigh before he lifted a hand to stroke the Fouille's grey coat and gave a rare, tender smile to the huge hound. He looked at his hands still encased in their gauntlets and gauged the power within them. He could sense no change.
"Still just a man,"
he said, his voice ragged.
"For now. Come, dog."
He stood silently, leaving the empty vial behind as he climbed back over the hill to the camp. Dog was on edge, always silent as ever, but he stuck nearer to his master than before. Denning's blue eyes were hard and cold, and if anyone had thought to notice,
possessed a strange halo of red, swimming in the whites, that wasn't there before.